3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie.
Welcome back to the Homegrown Nerds Podcast. That was an excerpt from The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this is The Lord of the Rings.
Hosted by
Ace Lambertus
and Bryce Young.
So, The Lord of the Rings is a fantastic series. We have touched previously on high fantasy, and The Lord of the Rings is considered the quintessential start of high fantasy by most.
Like top shelf wine cabinet, A+, S grade, whatever you call it.
Yes. It was the inspiration for quite a few high fantasy series, and just has been almost revered, both the movies and the books, especially the books, but the movies are probably more well known with this generation than the books are.
Yeah, it's just slightly unfortunate, but it still gets the point across.
Which, to this I have to preface that I have only slightly read the books. I read The Hobbit when I was younger, and I have currently been reading The Fellowship of the Ring. I've never read The Two Towers or the Return of the King. But I am fixing that mistake. It's sad to say that I have not read them yet. It is something that I was ashamed of for quite some time, that I as a giant nerd had not read The Lord of the Rings. And I am currently in the process of fixing that.
Well, no, in all rightfulness, you and I both, well, me more than you, haven't read the entire series.
Yep.
So, I've watched the entire series, both the trilogy and The Hobbit.
I have not watched all the Hobbit movies because
You're not really missing much.
I watched the first one and I was like,
First and second one are good, but the third one just dragged way too long.
Yep. The Hobbit, originally being a children's book, was not exactly designed for a 3-movie set.
Yeah.
At best, it should have been kept to 1, maybe 2 movies. At best.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, Smaug only makes a brief appearance in the books.
Yeah, he's only like 2 or 3 chapters long, I think.
Whereas in the movie, it's like 45 minutes long. It's like, whoo.
Yep, and the entire battle with the armies and everything, it just all drags.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, the fighting and all that's cool, but when there's not really any point besides fighting for one thing, it's kind of senseless, really.
Yep. There's also the added characters that they added in.
Yeah, that female elf.
Yeah. She was added in, which I have some issues with tampering with books that much, about adding a somewhat main character or somewhat a primary side story that's just like, it's there, but it's kind of pointless because the book was just fine without it.
Honestly, in my opinion, that's just Hollywood doing their thing. Like, well, we gotta have this part of it because that's in every movie.
Yeah. They tried to adhere to the cookie cutter thing and tried to fill it out, but
I mean, don't get me wrong. I did love the female elf and the dwarf having a kind of thing happening.
Yeah.
If it was a separate thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
like if they had like
I'm a romantic at heart.
Yeah.
So I love a good romance story. But from what I understand, I have not seen it. I have only seen like clips and snippets of it on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah.
But she was just too perfect of a character. And so the romance kind of fell flat for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as romantic plots go, like I said, I'm a big romance guy. I love romance. And I love a nice romantic side plot.
Mm-hmm.
But, man, it wasn't necessary.
Yeah. There was no purpose for her being there, actually.
Yes. I like what you said with the off to the side. Like,
yeah,
it would have been better if it was its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there was a series based around an elf and a dwarf and their adventures.
Maybe not even their own series, but like a one-off movie that could lead off into other movies that's not Silmarillion.
Yeah.
That, I think, would be a great idea.
Yes. Yeah.
But Hollywood.
Yeah. I mean, dwarves and elves aren't necessarily... I don't know if they're copyrighted. I don't think they are.
Like the name, or
like just what dwarves and elves are, like how they're portrayed in the Lord of the Rings. So you could make a movie that's kind of set in the realm of Mordor or Middle Earth, but you couldn't necessarily call it Middle Earth, I don't think, because I think Tolkien's estate still holds the rights to those. You could still do like a story of a dwarf and an elf. But
I want to say it is technically possible because I've seen things for like stories that are not fan fiction, but they're technically canon. Like a lot of Star Wars stuff,
mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily say it's part of it, just in case they get in trouble.
Yeah.
But yada yada yada.
Well, I know that currently, or they had, the Tolkien estate was releasing books that were Tolkien's notes on certain things. Mm-hmm. Because despite popular belief, the Silmarillion was wrote first.
That surprised me.
Yeah. It was written first. It was actually Tolkien's big love. He loved old poems and old tales and such of the like. And so the Silmarillion was really his project, but nobody wanted to publish it. However, they did publish his second main work, which is the Hobbit, which he had actually designed as a children's book for his kids. He'd written it for his kids, I believe, and got it published. People loved it so much, and they wanted a sequel. So he started writing The Lord of the Rings. He was still pushing for the Silmarillion to get like a publisher to let him start writing the Silmarillion, but he really wanted to go to get the Silmarillion out, but his publisher wanted a sequel to The Hobbit. And so
you're telling me Smaug is part of a children's book, though?
Yep.
You want me to read a quote of his?
Go for it.
Okay. This is from a children's book, supposedly.
Children's books were weird back then.
This is on page 207 of The Hobbit whichever version this is. I'll figure out later. But revenge, he snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Urien, Lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like wolf among sheep. And where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old. My armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are swords. My claws spears. The shock of my tail is thunderbolt. My wings a hurricane. And my breath death. That thing is part of a children's book.
Yep.
I want to say bull honky on that.
It's the reason why The Hobbit is short, sweet, and to the point. It's the reason why Smaug is only like 2 to 3 chapters long. It's a very quick, simple story. He does have a lot of larger language, very heavy language, but I mean, that was a children's book.
All right, but if my kids have nightmares, it's your fault.
They'll be all right. Everybody loves a good villain.
Oh, yes. But that aside, The Hobbit was the technical first of the trilogy. Of the series.
Of the series, yes. But The Hobbit was not originally written with Middle-earth in mind.
Right. It was just off onto the side, like, it's just yada yada.
Yeah. It was kind of written in that world because Tolkien had his mind was on the Silmarillion, but for the most part it was in the Fellowship of the Ring where he really started thinking, all right, if my publisher is not going to publish the Silmarillion, I still want to use it. So he started inputting the lore and the ideas that came from the Silmarillion into the Lord of the Rings.
Also, that's a really genius way of doing that.
Yep.
Because then if that makes a big hit, your original thing that's based in that world is going to be a big hit too.
Yep. Which, sadly, he never got the opportunity to publish the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion was, I believe, published after. It was edited by his son and put together by his son.
Well, as long as it wasn't like big corporation, like, oh, we gotta do this and that. As long as it wasn't that.
No. The Tolkien estate run by his son is its own separate entity. It's the reason why nobody has gotten the rights to the Silmarillion.
Oh, thank God.
And everything is very well controlled by his estate.
Okay, that's good to hear,
to keep his world pure. Even the books that Christopher has been putting out, he said, were based on his father's notes. He gathered up all his father's notes, read through them, looked through them, designed around them, and basically built the story up from his father's notes to release larger portions of the Silmarillion. So the Silmarillion is essentially a collection of stories.
5 of them, was it? That we know of.
I'm not sure how many. Yeah, 5, somewhere in there.
Okay, anyway.
But it's a collection of stories, almost like you would an Edda or like mythology. It's actually like that. because Tolkien designed it that way. Tolkien thought that Western Europe didn't really have, specifically the UK didn't have any sort of mythology for it, any sort of its own mythology.
Which is surprising.
So
very surprising because they have the England, right?
Yep.
UK.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own technical legend, even though it's already a story. King Arthur.
Yeah. But he felt like there wasn't like a full deep mythology. Like King Arthur is a story about like set in UK. But if you look to like the Norwegian areas or the Germanic areas, they have like Thor and Odin. Or you go down to the Mediterranean and you have Jewish culture, Christian culture. You have Roman mythology. You have Greek mythology, which are pretty close to the same.
Just about, yeah.
And he felt that the United Kingdom
needed more?
Kind of deserved a bit of mythology. And he very much loved that sort of writing. I think I'll have to look up what he was teaching. Let's see.
Oh, you're looking at it up, but you say that he's basing it off of like all the other mythology and stuff.
Yeah, he kind of pulled together a bunch of other, took inspiration from, I should say, all forms of mythology.
Mm-hmm. Because I know they have the not werebear, but they have a specific name for him. But he turns to man during the day, but at night he turns into a giant bear, and the Hobbit specifically.
Mm-hmm.
He was like him and his kind were like slaves to this one race and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you right now, that's based off of the old French mythology of the werewolf, obviously.
Yep.
And that's pretty prominent. That's like the easy one. Dragons, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that he would have to kind of take a little bit from everywhere and just bring it over to the UK. It makes complete sense.
Yep. And it also kind of, it worked. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, when they think about high fantasy, it's branched off into like sci-fi and other such genres, but the original high fantasy kind of was bred from fairy tales, which Tolkien was a fan of.
Oh, yeah.
Mythologies, fairy tales, which he then pulled inspiration from to create his own books, his own works. And now when you think of high fantasy, generally you think of the magical, at least I do, you think of the magical, fantastical era, but it's almost medieval of sorts. Mm-hmm. It's a medieval Western Europe kind of place with swords and shields and that sort of fighting.
Yeah,
not like Asian culture, or maybe not Asian, Oriental, is that a better word? Oriental culture, or like African culture, or any of the Americas. Mm-hmm. It's specifically Western Europe era, which means that it kind of worked.
I mean, it was recognizable by a lot of the people, too.
Yeah. So you can kind of look in the beginning of the Silmarillion and kind of get the understanding of his love of mythology as it starts like this. So I'll just read a little bit of this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the start of the Silmarillion. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called the LOTR, and he made first the Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought. And they were with him before aught else was made, and he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him. And he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only that part of the mind of Iluvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet they ever as they listened, they came to a deeper understanding, and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Iluvatar called together all the Ainur, and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Iluvatar and were silent. You can tell a lot of mythology was the encompassing start, almost.
I mean, it was a lot more intense than what you read. And then we start our story in a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
That's a lot more intense, honestly.
Yes. And for people looking for like a high fantasy story, like a full high fantasy story, the Silmarillion is not exactly your cup of tea. For those looking for deeper themes, for things almost gone beyond what the book is saying, reading and speaking to parallels, because he was a professor of literature, but he was also somewhat of a philosophist. He was a devout Catholic, and it speaks in his books. But they're not necessarily Christian works. That wasn't his intent. Was they are Catholic books, but they're not like, he didn't make them Christian works, so to speak.
He kept, I think I know what you're saying, he kept the theme of a high fantasy, but he heavily relied on Catholic beliefs in creating the actual story.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yes. So he pulled parallels from all of those things, as seen by a lot of the deeper themes of the Lord of the Rings. People generally only see a high fantasy story of Frodo gets the ring from Bilbo, who had the ring. Then he takes it on a journey to destroy it, and he destroys it.
With lots of things in the way.
Yes, with lots of things in the way. I'm very much paraphrasing.
Oh, we're paraphrasing. You guys, you're
yes.
going through three books here.
Yes. He goes through a journey to destroy it, to end it, and in the end, the ring is destroyed, and Sauron is destroyed with it.
A lot of people just see the epic instead of the deep understanding. That's kind of an insulting way of saying it, but they don't see the deep.
They don't appreciate the deep lore. They may see it, but they don't focus on it.
That sounds better. I'm sorry, everybody.
Yeah. No, I get what you were getting at, though. So things like the fact that Frodo is a parallel of self. He was kind of designed to be able to put yourself in his shoes. The idea of one struggling with something.
Their darker self or your central self.
Yeah. Dealing with something, a dark desire or something, which is taken form in the ring. That is his battle to hold. And so he is trying to fight and survive and strive to win against this dark desire. A friend of mine and a friend of ours is very big on the Lord of the Rings, and his knowledge is very deep.
We'll call him T-Dog for now.
T-Dog. So he's talked at length with me about the Lord of the Rings. He's read the Silmarillion multiple times. Loves it. It's probably one of his favorite books, if not his favorite book.
I don't blame him, though.
Yep. And then has also enjoyed all of Tolkien's works.
On top of that, you told me that he did a whole bunch of research on the side too.
Yeah, he's done his research. He loves Tolkien's works. But anyway, he brought up interesting parallels to my mind that I had never thought of, was that the ring, in the quote that you read earlier, was the one thing to go over all.
The one ring.
Yes, the one ring. It does not, as some people may think, represent necessarily wholly evil. It is not wholly evil. That is sort of represented from where Sauron came from. Sauron is, or was, a servant of, the name escapes me right now, and T-Dog's gonna hate me for the name escaping me.
I can't remember it either.
But Sauron was a servant to him, and only less so evil than he was that he followed somebody for a time, is the way the Silmarillion puts it. But he was not necessarily considered wholly. He was wholly evil. But the idea behind the ring is not that the ring was wholly evil. The ring itself was actually an embodiment of the will to dominate, which is not inherently evil. To hold dominion over man is to be able to create countries, cities, to be able to create civilization. A few hold domination over the many, and not like what one would consider domination, but it's not inherently evil.
Mm-hmm.
However, if misused, the will to dominate becomes evil.
Kind of like an example would be the, how do you say it? The events and agenda that Hitler had.
Yes.
That dominating is inherently evil.
Yes. It didn't start so at first.
Right. He was trying to bring Germany back up in power.
Yes. But then his will to dominate grew ever more, and it became what it became.
Yeah, like that's probably the best example of representing the ring in everyone's sense, at least.
Yes. And so that is why you get moments of like, let's use the ring, because it is the idea that it is the will to dominate over others, saying let's use it. Let's use it as a weapon against him.
Like the one guy in the Fellowship.
Boromir,
yeah.
Yeah. and that obviously gets turned down.
Yeah.
But the idea is it is bringing it back again, is someone struggling with something that might not be inherently evil, but is not good.
Right. And the ring, the way it works would be it slowly takes control of you going down the darker path of dominating.
Yes.
Instead of just like, boom, right there, it slowly does it.
Because it doesn't start inherently bad.
Yeah.
It's a magic ring that allows Frodo to disappear.
Onto the ether plane, yeah.
Yes, which puts him under the ring's influence. The same as it did for Bilbo. And which kind of brings around an interesting point of hobbits are a strange race. Many men throughout the Tolkien history have attempted to control the ring for their own gains since Sauron was defeated at whatever battle it was.
Yeah, but he was a servant of Morgoth. That's what it was.
Yep. Thank you. Servant of Morgoth. And so it came into the hands of Gollum.
At some point, yeah.
Who at the time was known as Smeagol, a hobbit, who had somewhat of the power to resist it, and got a hold of it and kept it for his own, and it slowly corrupted him, very much held him tight, and it also did part of its work, which is it increases your lifespan. Mm-hmm. Not so much that you continue to grow, but you merely stop, and it holds you. It holds you captive in time, keeping you moving forward, but never truly growing old. Mm-hmm. And so it gives you a long-lived life. What they don't show in the movies, what they do show in the books, is Gollum is, I think my friend said, centuries old.
Would he be?
He's old.
Ooh.
Yes, he is very old. He was quite long-lived when Bilbo came upon him. And when Bilbo came upon him and the ring decided to slip from Smeagol's hands, who had held it captive himself for many years, keeping it at bay, actually, because he never returned it to its original master, who was attempting to recover himself. He kept it at bay as himself, which is impressive, as most men normally died to it.
Yeah.
Or died for it, or died with it.
I don't think any elves or dwarves ever got the One Ring.
No, not to my knowledge.
Right, okay.
But he held it for a long period of time. And then it finally slipped from his grasp into Bilbo's hands. And Bilbo was able to hold it for many years. 50-odd years himself. And even then it only had started to corrupt him.
Yeah, because the ring's for dominating, as we've said.
Yep.
But when you're a hobbit and you have everything, both community, food, everything near you, there's not really anything to dominate.
No. Hobbits generally were simple folk.
Mm-hmm.
They dealt in farming and enjoying life at its fullest. They were kind of Tolkien's idea of an, not really ideal world, but the focusing on the world of the simple. The idea of a simple life, a life lived simply, which is...
Sounds like a quote.
It's not. So he very much used that to its own devices. But Bilbo held it for 50 years. He went on his journey, maybe 60 years. He went on his journey to the Lonely Mountain, where he got it. He got the ring. And I think at that point he was 51. I don't know if he had turned 51 yet or not. It's been a while since I've read The Hobbit. But I digress. He was 51, and when he released the ring to Frodo, it is said that he was 11-1, which means he was 111 years old, which is fairly...
It's unprecedented for a Hobbit.
Yeah. Hobbits, not the longest of lived, but certainly longer lived, but he wasn't looking his age was the main key. Right. He looked as good as he did at 50. He kept his youthful appearance of 50. And so when he turned 11-1, he bestowed upon Frodo, generally to the council of Gandalf.
Oh, good old wise Gandalf.
Good old Gandalf. With his counsel and his own thought process, he let the ring go, which is another thing that's unprecedented. He let the ring go and gave it to his heir, Frodo.
Frodo Baggins.
Frodo Baggins. And so that would make 60 years. He held it for 60 years.
Crazy.
Yep. And Frodo was turning 31 at that point because they shared the same birthday. It's part of what adhered Bilbo to Frodo. As they were not father and son, Frodo was his nephew, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yes, because he didn't because when he came back with the ring from the Lonely Mountain, I know you wanted to say this before, he was curious and strange, I think you
Yes, it is the best words to use. The book uses a different word, but he seemed strange to Shire folk because he'd gone on adventures. He's gone on an adventure, and the world seemed different. And with him being so long-lived due to the ring, he continued his strange behavior, including not growing old. So he seemed even more strange to these simple Shire folk. And as they do, they treated him as such, as a strange thing. And he found to dislike some of his relatives.
Because they were all just, oh, what is that guy over there? He's just so shrewd and everything. It's like, you don't know what I've been through.
Things like that, yes. They also thought he had a bunch of treasure. Which he had some.
He had some?
He had a fair bit of treasure, but not as much as the myth that was passed around.
Fair enough.
Shire. Anyway, and so in passing off the ring, Bilbo kind of did something that was unheard of by the ring's standards, was passing it on to somebody, giving up that will to dominate to someone younger, which was kind of brought about because of Bilbo's own actions. Bilbo, while under the power of the ring, to escape Gollum, who had marred his path in the cave, could have killed Gollum.
Because he was also wearing the ring at the same time.
Yes, he was wearing the ring at the same time. So the idea to dominate, to put domination over a creature, can take form in the ideal to kill. And it would have been easier for him to kill Gollum.
And in many eyes, it would be merciful for what Smeagol/Gollum was.
Yeah. He was a sad, decrepit creature who had gone on far longer than any creature should have gone on under the influence of the ring. Lived long, and people don't always catch on this. And once again, going back to the fact that this is a children's book, Gollum wanted to eat Bilbo.
Yeah, because he would eat not only decrepit dead things and all that, he would eat sentient things, right?
Yes.
Why is this a kid's book?
Don't ask me, man. Don't ask me. But a sad, decrepit thing that wanted to eat one of his own kind. He was crazy. But, I'm getting a call. Pause for a cause.
Pausing for a cause.
Sorry about that, folks. We're back. Anyway, so, Smeagol. Instead of killing Smeagol, he decided to, which was in his right, Smeagol was in his way, he decided to take pity and have mercy on the pitiful creature. And so made his way around Gollum and pushed past and through, leaving Gollum alive, which was also unheard of for the ring, and is generally considered the point at which the ring's power and will to dominate was broken. Not destroyed, but certainly lessened, as under the influence of the ring, someone chose to do something to release the domination.
Selfless.
There we go. Yes. To not think of oneself and to allow pity for another creature to take hold. And so moved past Gollum and certainly wounded the power of the ring. More than likely allowing him in his later life to hand the ring off to Frodo, who the movies don't show it, but the book certainly makes a theme of it, is that he also held it until he was 50. So he turned 31, and he held the ring. Gandalf didn't immediately know that it was the One Ring. He had his suspicions, certainly, but he didn't immediately know it was the One Ring.
Like, Gandalf may be all-knowing and stuff, but even he has his limits.
Yes. Which Gandalf is a whole other thing.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Yeah. But Gandalf tracks down Gollum to figure out where the ring came from, realizes what the ring is, and returns to Frodo when Frodo is 50. So Frodo at that point had held it for almost 20 years, 19 years. He had lived his strange life, the same strange life as Bilbo had, But at that point, strange things were starting to happen in Middle-earth. The elves were starting to make way for the sea, and more folk and dwarves and such were passing through the Shire, running away, essentially, from what we know to be the return of Sauron.
And his forces.
But in part, that was due to Gollum. Because after Gandalf had tracked down Gollum, pulled the story from him, and continued to follow back what had come from the ring, and attempting to discover, Gollum had wanted to get back his ring. And so he went to Mordor, where the forces of the Dark Lord found him and captured him, tortured him, and realized who had the ring, and that the ring still existed.
Well, he only gave like 2 words, Baggins and Shire.
Yes. And so that set about the endeavor of the Nazgul to make their way to the Shire.
Or the 9 Kings.
The 9 Kings, yes.
I like that better. I know Nazgul was like, ooh. Yes. 9 Kings like, ooh.
Yep.
That's my opinion. Don't take it from me.
No. I completely agree. The idea of the fact that they are the 9 Kings, that had grown on so long-lived that they had become spirits themselves. Corrupted and horrible spirits, horrible race. But anyway, going back to the ability to go over the ring, Frodo too has his moments with Gollum later in the series that some people pick up on, is that he also takes pity on Gollum when he knows Gollum is a pitiful creature. I think it was Gandalf that actually suggested to him that he have pity on such a creature.
I think so. That sounds right, at least.
But he adhered to that, and like his uncle Bilbo, he also had pity on Gollum and let him live. When, once again, it was perfectly within his right to end him.
Yeah, end him. Yeah. That's nicer.
And so by doing so, he ended up bringing about, due to his act of mercy, his act of pity, it sort of came back full circle. By giving an act of pity, Bilbo was able to release the ring from his self. By giving an act of pity, Frodo was able to release the ring from himself. When coming to the crux of the issue, standing there in Mount Doom, he began to think, why should I let this ring go? In the center of enemy territory where the struggle is hardest, he nearly fell. And Gollum came and, in his own selfish desires, took the ring.
Releasing the
burden from Frodo and ending his own pitiful existence.
Very sad.
Very sad. It is a very sad story for Gollum. One who is lost to their desires. But Frodo, who did not, who struggled so hard against it, was rewarded in the end with help. And was given that help through Gollum, who took the ring and ended up killing himself in the process.
Yeah. A lot of people say Samwise was the true hero, but honestly, it was Smeagol.
In some ways, it was.
Mm-hmm. Sam was the brave and loyal friend of Frodo. He was necessary for Frodo to get from the Shire to Mordor.
Yep.
Mordor. There we go.
But in the end, the pitiful creature of Gollum was the one that ended up ending the ring.
Mm-hmm.
As strange and weird of a idea that is. The one who had held it longest, the one who had done the most with it, was the one to finally end it.
Very poetic, that's for sure.
Which is exactly what Tolkien gets at.
Yeah.
He loves the idea of those deeper themes. And you brought up Sam, and gotta love Sam.
Yeah, that is the most loyal friend anyone can have.
Yep. He can be somewhat annoying at times of his never-ending devotion to Frodo.
Oh, Mr. Frodo.
Oh, Mr. Frodo.
You get a lot of that, which, yeah, of course it gets annoying, but he's the loyalest son of a gun out there.
Yeah. He wants to see the best for his master.
Mm-hmm.
And he does his best to bring that about. In the movie, he carries Frodo when Frodo can't seem to stand no longer.
Instead of taking the ring, too.
Yep. He helps his friend, also resisting that will to dominate. And so he was based off of either some people or someone Tolkien knew. Tolkien fought in World War I.
Yeah.
So he saw battles and other sorts of horrible things.
I think that was the friend who was a pilot. I want to say that, but don't quote me on it.
I don't know, but he based Sam on either some people or someone he saw who ran into bullet fire to drag soldiers back into the bunkers, to pull them back out of the fire, to step into the danger with their friend, to pull them back in, to reel them back to safety. And he based Sam off that idea of character, which each person in his tales sort of upholds that idea of character. Sam is the idea of loyalty, to loyally be that friend to the end, and hold that character tightly. Frodo is the idea of self,
to resist that sense of dominance or that
whatever it is for you.
Yeah, that dark entity that wants you to go down the dark path.
Yes. Gandalf is kind of adherent in humankind, the wisdom of humankind, or just the wisdom of man.
Sounds cooler.
Sounds cooler.
We're judging everyone now because of their names now.
So he is very wise, very knowing. He is not, in fact, man. He is something else entirely, but we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah.
And Aragorn is the same way.
Yeah,
he is the idea of man at its best.
Yeah, the epitome of it.
The epitome of man. and so on and so forth throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Aragorn is my favorite character.
He's a lot of favorite characters.
I love Strider. He's badass. He's very much a strong-willed character who has his own problems but rises above. But this is Frodo's tale. And so while I enjoy Aragorn, I can't fully relate to him.
He's his own character, really.
He is his own character.
You can't really put your name in there instead. You can't resemble it at all. You can't copy it. You can't do any of that.
No.
He's completely different.
Yep. And so you're made to more relate to the four hobbits. Frodo is the primary, but also Sam. I probably relate to Sam the most, being a loyal friend. And so I'm able to relate to those people more. And that's sort of the point, is that Aragorn was the idea of man at its best. What you strive for. He was a mentor, a helper. He was strong and led forward. But he wasn't you. You have to make your own battles, have your own struggles. You have to strive forward to do whatever it is you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is sort of the epitome of it, is that it is a story about self. Mostly in the three main books. Is it a story of self? The Silmarillion is an entirely different beast in and of itself, but it holds pieces of that. Pieces of Tolkien's life sort of mixed in with mythologies and other things, and it holds its own deeper meanings and philosophies, which I highly recommend either finding a friend who knows a lot about it or reading it yourself.
You know I'm going to steal that book now, right? Just going to sneak in here when you're sleeping, just yank it.
Yep. So I would put it at that. Is that it's, while it is easy to take it as at face value, one must truly dig deeper and go down to the nitty-gritty details to truly see the beauty that is to be found in these books.
That's why it's going to stand the test of time, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. And the movies are also good, at least the original trilogy, because the director adhered so much. He didn't perfectly adhere to the books.
You can only do so much, though.
But he adhered to the, how to put it, the ideas, the themes. He understood that if you look at some of the behind-the-scenes things, he understood that Frodo was the main story. He understood Tolkien's influences. A lot of the architecture and stuff is based off of the era or the place of which Tolkien derived from to sort of hold. He kept that dream in there. He adhered to the idea and the dream behind, which is why the movies are good. Not as great as the books, but still great movies. They adhere so well to those ideas and themes, such as when the Rohirrim arrive at Minas Tirith, a great battle takes place there.
Which one is that one in?
That's Return of the King.
Thank you.
That specific battle, I believe, and I will be corrected if I am wrong, is based off of the defense of Constantinople, with which the winged hussars arrived, coming in to save, I think it was Constantinople. I may be wrong about Constantinople, but for which the winged hussars arrived, which the winged hussars were a great army group. Anyway,
I won't doubt that.
I'm a lot of history.
Yeah, I only got like the big events of history when I was in school, so I'm like, okay,
okay,
I'm listening, but okay.
Yep, was based on that battle of them coming in and saving the day. Oddly heroic and makes for a great story, but is, to some people's minds, surprising that it is actually based on a historical event.
I'll say, because imagine how they actually felt on the battlefield when that happened.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. It surprised me too when T-Dog told me that.
Ooh.
I was like, really? And it's only been from him that I've fully started to grasp the ideas and have brought back my love of it, and I've started to myself dive deeper into Tolkien lore and such. But we're kind of coming to the end of our time, and we still have a lot to unpack. But
True.
We'll go ahead and end it here for today.
Yeah, final thoughts from me. For any of those writers who actually want to go deeper into the stuff, get the books, thorough read it, and analyze it the best that you can. Even discuss it with other people who've read it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to write that kind of stuff, take stuff from real life. You got to have real life moments. That's how you get the emotional stuff in it. That's how you make it believable.
Yep.
Because that's exactly what Tolkien did.
Mm-hmm.
It may be high fantasy, it may be like way out there, but most of it's based on stuff that's already been around.
Mm-hmm.
That's my final thought.
My final thoughts have got to be just amazement at what Tolkien accomplished, but also understanding that where it comes from, where it is based, it gives me a deeper appreciation for such things. Ancient poetry, histories, those ideas, those structures. While this is a work of fiction, it is based off of real life events and real life struggles.
Mm-hmm.
It is both an escape as well as a way to connect deeper with oneself.
There you
go. It battles with different themes. It pulls ideas, while all telling a great story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives me that deep appreciation for all things life, history, the goodness of man, the badness of man. Just, it gives me a deeper appreciation for that. And I encourage people to look at those deeper things.
All right, fair enough.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Yep, thank you for listening to Homegrown Nerds, hosted by
Ace Lambertus
and Bryce D. Young. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.